Vincent Crabbe. Vincent Crabbe had spent 6 years at Hogwarts in Draco Malfoy's shadow, functioning as muscle and presence rather than anything more. He was not a strategist or a leader. He was 17 years old, the son of a Death Eater, and by the night of the Battle of Hogwarts, he had chosen a side without fully understanding what that choice required. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione entered the room of requirement searching for a Horcrux, Crabbe saw an opportunity to finally matter. He had learned a spell that most adult wizards would never dare attempt. Fiendfyre is not ordinary fire. It is cursed flame that takes on living shapes, that thinks in the way that destruction thinks, that spreads with intention, and cannot be called back once released. Crabbe cast it meaning to kill 3 people who were standing in front of him. What happened instead was that the fire answered him once and then stopped listening entirely. The flames rose immediately into creature shapes, serpents, and beasts rolling through the enormous hidden room, catching everything they touched. The room was packed with centuries of hidden objects, all of it feeding the blaze. Harry grabbed Draco, Ron grabbed Goyle. They reached brooms and got into the air as the fire climbed toward them. Crabbe did not make it to a broom. The fire he had released did not distinguish between the people it had been aimed at and the person who had aimed it. Ron said afterward, with the particular flatness that comes after something genuinely terrible, that Crabbe had managed to kill himself without getting anyone else. It was accurate. He had found a spell powerful enough to matter, and it had simply consumed him first, in a room full of 100 years of other people's secrets. Bartemius Crouch Jr. Bartemius Crouch Jr. was, by any measure, the most devoted Death Eater Voldemort ever had. He had gone to Azkaban for his master rather than deny him, had endured years of imprisonment, had spent an entire school year maintaining a flawless disguise as Alastair Moody, while engineering the return of a wizard the rest of the world was pretending was gone forever. When his cover was finally broken at the end of the Triwizard Tournament, he was restrained, given Veritasirum, and made to confess everything in front of Dumbledore. He told them all of it. Every detail of the plan, every step he had taken. It was the most complete account of Voldemort's return that existed anywhere. Then Cornelius Fudge arrived at Hogwarts with a Dementor as his personal escort, and within moments of entering the room, the Dementor administered the kiss. Fudge considered it appropriate. He did not understand or did not care that he had just destroyed the only witness who could have proven everything Dumbledore was saying about Voldemort's return. Dumbledore's fury was immediate and total, but none of that changed what had already happened. The Dementor's kiss does not kill in any conventional sense. It removes the soul entirely, leaving the body intact and breathing. Everything that made Bartemius Crouch Jr. who he was, his intelligence, his fanaticism, his absolute certainty in Voldemort's cause, his memory of every sacrifice he had made, was gone in an instant. His body continued to exist afterward, kept alive in some ministry holding facility, breathing without awareness, without identity, without anything at all. He had given every part of himself to his master's return, and the thing that emptied him of all of it was not an enemy. It was a bureaucrat who didn't think before he acted. Walden McNair had built his career around the Ministry's willingness to let him decide which magical creatures were too dangerous to be permitted to live. He was the committee for the disposal of dangerous creatures executioner, which meant he arrived with a large axe and official paperwork and left having done what the paperwork authorized. He had come to Hogwarts in 1993 to kill a hippogriff named Buckbeak, had sharpened his blade and waited in the pumpkin patch, and had been furious when the condemned animal disappeared before he could reach it. He spent years afterward as an active Death Eater, recruiting giants to Voldemort's side during the lead-up to the Second Wizarding War, moving through the darkest parts of the conflict as someone who had never been troubled by the mechanics of ending a life. By the Battle of Hogwarts, he was fighting inside the castle, alongside whatever remained of Voldemort's forces, in a building that by that point contained something his entire career had never prepared him for. Voldemort had brought giants to the battle, enormous ones who attacked the castle walls from outside and eventually pushed through into the ground. Not all of them were fighting for Voldemort. Some had been persuaded otherwise, and they moved through the chaos of the battle with the particular destructive force that comes from something that large moving quickly through a space that small. McNair was thrown against a wall by one of them with enough force to end the encounter immediately. The man who had spent years determining the fates of magical creatures died in a single instant at the hands of exactly the category of being he had spent that career controlling, in a battle he had believed his side would win. Voldemort Tom Riddle had spent the better part of 7 decades engineering a situation in which he could not die. He had split his soul into 7 pieces and hidden them across the world. He had acquired the most powerful wand ever made. He had built an army, seized control of 2 governments, and reduced the wizarding world to a state of terror so complete that most people would not say his name aloud. By the time he faced Harry Potter in the Great Hall for the last time, he believed every variable had been resolved in his favor. The Horcruxes were gone, but he didn't know that. The Elder Wand was in his hand, but he didn't understand who it truly belonged to. He cast the killing curse at Harry Potter for the 2nd time in 17 years. And for the 2nd time, the curse encountered a wand that had already decided it was working for someone else. The Elder Wand's allegiance had passed to Harry through a chain of events that had nothing to do with power or worthiness, and everything to do with a specific sequence of who had disarmed whom in the months prior. The curse rebounded. Tom Riddle fell in the Great Hall of Hogwarts in front of students, teachers, and survivors of a battle he had been certain he would win. In the book, there is no disintegration, no dramatic visual collapse. He simply falls, and what remains is a body, small and ordinary. The body of a man who had been afraid of death since childhood and had structured his entire existence around avoiding it. He had not become immortal. He had only postponed this moment. And when it arrived, he died as he had always been, underneath everything else, mortal, alone, and ordinary. Bellatrix Lestrange. By the final hours of the Battle of Hogwarts, Bellatrix Lestrange was one of the last Death Eaters still standing in the Great Hall. She had served Voldemort longer than almost anyone, had spent 14 years in Azkaban for him without breaking, and had returned to his side the moment he called. She was the most dangerous person in that hall, and she knew it. When a curse she fired came within inches of Ginny Weasley, nobody expected what happened next. Molly Weasley stepped forward. Bellatrix turned to face her with something close to amusement. She had spent decades making people fear her, and here was a mother in a cardigan challenging her in the middle of a war. She taunted her, the words designed to wound, asking what would happen to Molly's children once she had finished with her. It was the last thing Bellatrix Lestrange ever said. Molly's spell crossed the distance between them and struck her directly in the chest above her heart. For just a moment, Bellatrix's expression didn't change. The smile stayed exactly where it was, frozen on her face, as though she hadn't yet understood what had happened to her. Then she fell. There was no dramatic last breath, no final speech, no reaching toward Voldemort across the room. She simply dropped, and she was already gone before she hit the floor. Across the hall, Voldemort let out a scream of rage, the only moment in the entire battle where he lost control of himself entirely. The woman he had trusted above all others, the one who had never once wavered, was dead. She had been killed, not by an Auror, not by Harry Potter, but by a mother who had watched her nearly hit her daughter. Peter Pettigrew. Peter Pettigrew had survived for 12 years as a rat, then several more as Voldemort's most servile follower, by doing one thing consistently, choosing himself over everyone else. He had betrayed James and Lily Potter, faked his own death, framed Sirius Black, and handed Voldemort the blood he needed to return to power. Every time a choice appeared between his own survival and loyalty to another person, the answer had always been simple. That pattern held all the way to the cellar of Malfoy Manor, until the one moment it didn't. Harry and Ron were escaping, and Pettigrew was sent to stop them. When Harry reminded him of the life debt between them, something shifted. His silver hand, the magical prosthetic Voldemort had conjured for him as a reward for his years of service, registered the hesitation immediately. It did not wait for Pettigrew to act on whatever flicker of mercy had surfaced. The hand moved on its own, turning against its owner, closing around his throat with the full, indifferent strength Voldemort had built into it. Pettigrew's eyes went wide. Ron grabbed at the silver fingers and pulled with everything he had, but the hand was stronger than anything human, and it did not respond to him at all. Pettigrew's lips changed color. His body struggled against something he could not fight and could not remove. A gift from the master he had given everything to, now ending him for 1 second of hesitation. He collapsed onto the cellar floor. The hand had not been designed to punish enemies. It had been designed to reward service. And when that service wavered, for the first and only time in his life, it treated the hesitation as a betrayal. Severus Snape. Severus Snape had spent 17 years walking a line so narrow that a single wrong word, a single misread moment, could have ended everything. He had been Dumbledore's spy inside Voldemort's inner circle, had watched colleagues commit atrocities he couldn't stop without exposing himself, and had carried the full weight of that double life completely alone. By the night of the Battle of Hogwarts, he had done everything that was asked of him. Voldemort summoned him to the Shrieking Shack, not to reward him, but because of a theory about wand ownership. He believed that killing the Elder Wand's last master would transfer its full allegiance to him, and he believed that master was Snape. He didn't use his own wand. He simply told Nagini to kill, and the snake struck from inside the enchanted glass enclosure Voldemort had conjured around her, hitting Snape repeatedly in the neck before Voldemort turned and walked out without looking back. Harry, Ron, and Hermione found him on the floor in a widening pool of blood, still conscious, his body working against the inevitable with every second. He told Harry to take his memories, and Harry held out a conjured flask as Snape's tears carried 17 years of truth out of him. Everything about Lily, everything about his choices, everything he had never been able to say. The blood loss was progressing faster than he could hold back. His dark eyes found Harry's face and stayed there, and his last words were not about Voldemort or the war or the mission he had completed. They were 3 words directed at Harry's eyes, which were his mother's eyes, the ones he had been looking toward in one way or another for his entire adult life. If you want to see more, click the video